Hey everybody, today is review number 2 of the RSD Sargent V3. Today we are reviewing it in rigid mode. So I made a few changes to the bike. I threw my clipless pedals on and I've got the rigid fork on it. You can buy this bike in 2 configurations. One is with the Matic suspension fork that I reviewed last time, and 2 is with the RSD aluminum rigid fork right here. Now this has clearance for up to 4-inch tires. An interesting thing that it also has are these 6 rack mount holes where you can put racks, water bottle holders, and for bike packers and people covering long distance, that really opens up the versatility of this. This has a 510 millimeter axle to crown. The Matic has a 550. So what that means is the head tube is sitting 40 millimeters lower. That gives it a 67.5 degree head tube angle. It lowers the bars a little bit. The frame is exactly the same, but when you change the fork, the geometry changes as well. I'm here with my wonderful dog, Fender. You ready to go mountain biking? Let's go. We're in beautiful Sedona, and we are gonna tackle some less challenging trails than some of the other reviews I've done, because I don't think people are buying this in rigid mode to go tackle the absolute craziest stuff they can find. They'll get beat up. I can tell already that the front end is a little bit lower. The stack is lower, which gives it a racy feel, kind of like a sporty, it wants to carve corners a little bit more. Couple that with the slightly steeper head angle. Oh, this is fun. It gives the bike a totally different feel. There's something awesome about a simple bike with fewer moving parts. Don't get me wrong, suspension is awesome, but I don't know, it's just got kind of a simple feel, which is why I like hardtails in general anyway. I can't quite plow through stuff as much as I used to. Still, this is quite capable with the big tires. That was a 18-inch drop back there. Cool. Oh, this is fun. It's been probably 15 years since I've owned a rigid bike. But on smooth stuff like this, wow, is it fun. It's harder to get into a manual, but you're not buying this bike to manual, but it's worth mentioning anyway. Hi. Just me. Thanks so much. Have a good one. Fender's got good corner technique. Can't keep up with him. Oh, this is so good on this stuff. I picked the right trail. And I think that's the secret for an all-rigid bike, is picking the right trail. But this isn't like the bike park goof around wheelie hardtail. This is like bike packing, adventure riding, overnighters, just getting out there, enjoying the simplicity of a simple bike. It's surprising how controlled it is without a front fork when you can run the plus tires. I feel like the geometry of this bike, there's no reason to ride flat pedals on this bike, because at least for me, having clips just helps you put down speed, put down miles. And I prefer flats when I'm doing stunts and crazy riding. And I'm not doing that today. Bike climb's really good in this mode. Even better than with the Matic. What a beautiful day. Got a little more chunk on this section. I have to keep my speed in check a little more. Hello. Thanks. It's a little bit bouncier with that low pressure. My tires are rebounding. Oh yeah, we're good. I can't tell you how nice it is to have that low front end for climbs because of the rigid fork. Couple that with the long chainstay, it's super planted. When you're bike packing, even if you have a super nice suspension fork, it's not behaving like a super nice suspension fork because your bike's got 20 or 30 pounds of gear on it. And that fluctuates throughout the day when you eat food and drink water, and your suspension settings are never really dialed anyway. So as long as it's not absolutely brutal, a rigid fork might be the way to go. I actually prefer hardtails over full suspension for bike packing for that reason too. These tires feel light and snappy. It accelerates quick. I'm really enjoying this rigid fork more than I thought I would. It is so beautiful out here. But yeah, this bike, especially with the rigid fork, encourages me to slow down a little, to stop and soak it in and have a different experience than when I'm riding my middle child. If I had a $200 budget to change this, I would upgrade the shifter. The SLX thumb shifter, I'm used to SRAM. I like both, but the paddle shifter just has a lot of play and it makes such a light click. It's not a definitive click. I'd consider an XT or XTR shifter. I'd probably go with a bigger front rotor and that wolf tooth lever and grips like I talked about, and then just ride the heck out of it until something broke. Such a neutral, balanced, comfortable ride. The head angle would normally be bothering me with a steeper stack, with a taller stack, but it's not. Man, this is so fun. I feel bad I've been missing out on enjoying rigid forks for so long. You can see all the specs online, but we'll go through it real quick. Race face turbine aluminum cranks, super solid, super reliable, nice big 30 mil spindle, SLX 11 speed, SLX hydraulic brakes, Sunringle Duroc 50 rims, which have a 46 mil internal width, and we're running the RSD aluminum fork with 6 bottle mounts on each side, which is going to be awesome for bike packing. It comes with an axle. I'm not incredibly crazy about the actual axle itself. It's got a pretty small mechanism on this quick release. I feel afraid that I'm going to break it. I'd like to see if I can get a bolt-on axle for that. That'd simplify it even more. Race face turbine R bar, 50 mil stem, aluminum frame that does not beat you up. It's surprising how this frame, even though it's big, thick tubes, it's nice and stiff when you put power down, but it's not beating me up at all. WTB Coda saddle on a KS Lev dropper. This is a 125 mil dropper. One thing I love about this frame is that it has a completely straight seat tube. That means I could run a super long, I could probably run a 170 mil dropper in there with how much post I've got sticking out. It does have a small front triangle, which gives you great standover, but you're not going to fit a whole lot of gear in there with a bike packing bag, so I'd run a top tube bag on there. And I'd run a rack on this and load up the front a lot. What a simple bike though. There's something to be said for simple, fun machines. I'll bet this would be a blast as a single speed as well. It's really funny how a different bike will change your riding experience. I'm stopping more, I'm taking breaks, not because I'm tired, just because I want to spend more time out in nature, unwinding. It's a completely different experience on this bike, and it's all in my head. It's not like the bike makes me take more breaks, but I don't know, I'm not looking for the biggest drop I can hit or the biggest jump I can hit or the hardest thing I can make it up. I'm just out here exploring, having fun, soaking it in, enjoying this amazing scenery. and spending some time with my dog. But it just dawned on me, I just sat on this log and we've been here for maybe 5 minutes just kind of hanging out. And it's a good reminder to me that no matter what bike I'm on, I need to do that more. But on solo rides, I do that more, and on a bike like this, where it's not like the most aggressive, fast-paced, cutting-edge ride on the very edge of your limit bike. It's a let's see how far away from civilization we can get type of experience, and I love that too. So I think it's a good idea to get the kind of bike that your friends have, or at least whoever you ride with normally has. If you always ride with buddies who are trying to get better at jumps and drops and crazy stuff, get a bike like the middle child that rewards that. If you're more into the adventure travel or exploration or distance or overnighters, man, it's a solid choice. Personally, I think I would buy this with the rigid fork over the Manitou. It just complements the rest of the bike so well. Because if I'm shredding, I want the middle child. And if I'm exploring, I want the rigid fork. I wish you could see the smile on my face. It's just a grin all the time, just enjoying mellow trails again. This wouldn't be super fun on my other bike. I'm a big fan of getting the least amount of travel possible for what you need. It just makes the bike feel a little more alive. It doesn't mute the trail. It doesn't make everything feel like a magic carpet ride. It makes easy stuff fun again. It's just such a joy to climb on and just explore. I'm really enjoying myself today. One other thing I forgot to mention, when you run the rigid fork, the bottom bracket drops, and it is noticeable on the corners. I haven't smacked my pedals on anything yet, but I have noticed in corners that this bottom bracket is nice and low. It's just planted feeling. It's actually pretty neat being on a bike where the head angle doesn't change. Because of that rigid fork, the steering geometry is always the same. I'm so glad I got to try this with the rigid front fork, because it's definitely my preference on this bike. Take a look at where we are. This is incredible. You gotta be more precise with your line choice on the rigid fork. I can't wait to review this with the fat tire, see what I think of it then. Really impressed with this rigid fork. No play in it, no weird noises or knocks. Yeah, I can safely say I'm not gonna put the Matic back on this bike. The chainstay is longer than the reach when you're a size small. But, you know, for carrying weight and loads and packing around, and where you're mostly seated on this bike, when climbing, this takes a little bit less energy to ride than the middle child, aside from the fact that I'm having to dodge rocks with the front. But just your riding position is more neutral, and I'm not charging as much. And when I'm just sitting here in the neutral position, the bike handles really well. These corners are so good on here. This bike leans super well. I haven't found a 67.5 degree head angle bike that leans nearly this well. Usually you have to steer with the bars. This bike, I'm able to keep the steering pretty straight. Oh, this is so cool. Yeah, those manuals are still really tough. So here's a little reminder. If it's been a while since you just got out and unwound on a ride and forgot about your troubles and forgot about your skills and technique and speed and Strava rating, turn all that crap off and just go out and have a ride and enjoy it. Remember what got you into riding in the first place. Oh, it pumps so much better with the rigid. That's so cool. I love how that steering geometry doesn't change. What a cool benefit to rigids that I forgot about. So on a traditional telescoping front fork, when you hit bumps, the head angle is always changing. When you're turning the bars and halfway through a corner, you can feel that. Whereas on this, it just, I mean, it's bumpy and bouncy, but it keeps that same feel all the way through. Now I'm curious to try the rigid fork on my middle child. I wonder what that would be like. Woohoo! This is so fun. Oh, this is fun. We're in a wash. Pretty chunky in here. Oh, this is so cool. So with the rigid, I'm definitely having to slow down and take it easy through this stuff. Woo! Yeah, so fun. So far I've had 0 pedal strikes today, but I'm pretty good at timing my pedals. The only rattle through all this jank are the cables hitting each other a little bit because they're a little too long. Man, that's a solid bike. This will make you such a clean rider to ride rigid. More adventure. Holy cow, what a fun experience. Personally, I'd buy it with a rigid and then buy lower end rock shocks that'll still clear a 29 by 3.0. So you still have massive options with it, but I think it'll perform a little better than the Manitou. But what a treat this has been. Because the front end is 40 millimeters lower, it climbs so well. I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10 for climbing. You're in the perfect climbing position with the front end low, that long chainstay. You almost never have to stand up. You can stay seated through almost everything. But it's a different riding experience. Don't expect to just plow through everything and be lazy on your line choice. But since the front end is not changing its geometry through each bump, that rigid fork makes it so fun, especially to corner. And cornering, I'm gonna give this a 10 out of 10. That is such a fun cornering experience. But for long, all day pedally stuff where you're just in the saddle grinding out miles, it's extremely comfortable. The ability to strap bags onto your forks is awesome. For bike packing, this is definitely how I would set it up. For downhills, I wouldn't take this down a double black, I don't think. I'd rather have a fork for that sort of thing. Like the geometry and the position for downhills, as long as you're on greens and blues, it's gonna do really well. But I'm gonna give it, like, overall maybe a 7. You don't have a suspension fork, it's gonna be harder to ride downhill, especially at speeds. But the geometry and the position is fantastic. Fun factor, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. It's a new type of fun, a simplicity type of fun, a exploring type of fun, but this bike still isn't what I would call playful. It's not fun to bunny hop. It's even harder to manual than when it had the telescoping fork on it. I wouldn't want to jump excessively like this. Not that the fork couldn't take it, but that long chainstay for me, for it being a short rider, just makes the front end want to stay planted, which for long all-day touring adventure bikes is perfect. But if it was my only bike, I'd rather have the middle child because I like the playful dance around stuff. I feel like this bike really came into its own with this rigid fork. Anyway, this opened up a whole new kind of genre or style of riding to me, a whole new way to have fun on my bike. And I'm not gonna put the Matic back on this frame. I love it in rigid mode. My middle child is still gonna be my main bike. It suits what I ride most of the time, but this is just different enough to have a completely different experience when riding it. Highly recommend it. Stay tuned for review number 3. Thanks for watching. There's a party in the mountains and you're always invited.